Thank you very much, Murali. That was incredibly kind and generous. And I was also struck by Kartik's metaphor of caste as an operating system. And I will have something to say about that in what I have to say now. I'm very grateful to the Ambedkar King Study Circle for the invitation to speak. And I'm certainly honored to be part of this conversation on caste and casteism at a crucial juncture, triggered, of course, by the lawsuit against Cisco Systems, which highlights persisting forms of discrimination internationally and the need for legal redress. As a person of privilege within my own systems of caste, being white, male, middle class, without personal experience of sati or jati, identity and exclusion, I'm conscious of the persistence, the pertinence of an acronym I was recently told, WAIT, which stands for Why Am I Speaking? And I speak now not because I think I can tell those on this webinar things that you don't already know. And I certainly have the greatest respect for those with intimate experience of caste and its effects. But I hope that as an academic researcher, I can, in a way, bear witness to and communicate the realities of caste discrimination and its effects. The background to this is my personal research journey, and Murali has sort of mentioned some of the things I'm going to refer to. But this research journey has fostered a concern with caste and its oppressions and denials over nearly 40 years now. I want briefly to mention the steps in this journey because they have a bearing on what I want to say in the second half of my talk about the contemporary denial of caste. I first witnessed the practices of caste subordination, segregation, and the humiliation of Dalit laborers when volunteering in a village in Western Tamil Nadu in the late 1970s. I returned to rural Tamil Nadu in 1982-4 as a graduate researcher, having read about caste hierarchy and its resistance in social and religious movements. And I was especially interested in the experience of Dalit communities who'd become Christian in South India. I'd been taught that caste was founded on Hindu religious ideas of purity and impurity and Varna categories, and imagined that religious conversion would be a source of liberation and resistance. I discovered, in fact, a much more complicated relationship between caste and religion, and that caste could also take Christian form. But also realized that taking caste as a matter of religion or ritual or Hindu tradition could and has become integral to the denial of caste effects in modern society. And I'll return to that. I returned again to South India in the late 1980s and early 1990s to work for the development NGO Oxfam, as Murali also mentioned. The culturalization of caste, as Murali puts it, and the economization of poverty at the time largely excluded caste from policy frameworks for responding to poverty, exploitation, or injustice in development organizations. Then in the late 2000s, I returned to research this problem, and that is to say the exclusion of caste from frameworks of policy and development, and the movement by NGOs and activists at the time to bring a Dalit rights perspective to urgent matters of poverty, the denial of services, restricted opportunity, linked to international legal human rights frameworks, such as on racial discrimination. In short, to challenge the exclusion of caste from development. And then most recently, again, as has been mentioned, from 2013, I joined Meena Danda and Annapurna Wogre and others, and they both spoke in this series a few weeks ago as academic researchers contributing to the development of secondary legislation in the UK to include caste as a ground for prohibited discrimination in the equalities legislation. And I'll return to this topic at the end, especially the denials of caste that the prospect of legal change prompted. My research experience of caste practice points to 4 misconceptions that are today mobilized to perpetuate caste practices through the denial of caste and the denial of the experience of caste discrimination by those who are its victims. And we might want to discuss these misconceptions further after the talk. The first misconception, as I see it, is that caste is a matter of traditional religious institutions and cultural practices, especially of Hinduism. I've already mentioned that caste was present and practiced among Christians. And second, relatedly, that caste is a matter internal to Hinduism and to the Indian nation and its culture, internal both in form and in the solutions that might be applied to caste and caste discrimination. Caste discrimination is thereby excluded from the purview of mainstream economic and development planning of the secular state, and also from the concerns of international organizations. Caste, which for a large section of humanity is at least as pervasive as gender, race, age, religion, or other dimensions of human inequality and discrimination, is entirely absent from global policy debate and its intergovernmental platforms, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, which makes no mention of caste. And the Indian government makes stringent efforts to ensure that the language of caste doesn't enter the agenda of United Nations treaty bodies. A third misconception is that caste is a non-modern effect, gradually being removed by processes of modernization or urbanization or development, and especially market-driven economic growth in the post-reform era in India. And this designates caste politics and anti-caste struggles as the non-modern other, belonging to the lower castes, while, as MSS Panyan puts it, to quote, the Indian modern inscribes itself silently as upper caste. A fourth misconception, the final one here, is that the problem of caste, the persisting problem of caste, is a residual matter of social disability, affecting disadvantaged groups and to be dealt with by special measures and remedial protections, so that they, the disadvantaged groups, may, in the government social policy rhetoric, overcome their social and educational handicaps and catch up with the rest of the population. And that's from the National Commission on Scheduled Castes. This denies caste as an ongoing relational problem between groups and part of the ongoing unequalizing socioeconomic processes, which, of course, is how Ambedkar has insisted we should regard caste. Now, I'll return to these misconceptions and denials, but I want first to set them against what I see as some fundamentals of caste and of casteism in its contemporary form, brought to light in particular by the debate around caste discrimination and legal protection in the US and the UK. I can pick up points set out by Balmurali in the first talk in this series on conceptualizing caste. Caste may refer to different things. It is endogamous or in-marrying groups or jatis or groups of jatis. Caste might also be thought of as networks. Caste is a social categorization. Caste is the attribution and valuation of inherent or cultural difference. Caste may also be a set of effects, inequality, for instance, or discrimination, or opportunity, or privilege, Caste may be understood as a primary social cleavage between Dalits and others. For sure, caste and its effects exist only in relation to or as aspects of other social relations or transactions, such as of gender or class, employment, markets, electoral politics. Caste may be brought to attention, or caste may be invisibilized. So turning to some of these fundamental characteristics, first it's helpful, as Morley did a few weeks ago, to distinguish caste as an abstraction, a set of ideas about human differences, worth and claims to group prestige on the one hand, and on the other, casteism, which are the practices and interactions that produce and reinforce caste in concrete, through concrete actions. It's the basic interactional nature of caste, that's to say in casteism, that makes caste essentially relational. These attitudes and practices involve social categorizations, and that's another fundamental aspect of caste. That is, judging and treating individuals on the basis of the group identity or the category or a category, rather than their individual characteristics. And these categorizations, and this might be a third point, have developed along with and serve economic and political power. As the vast historical and anthropological literature attests, caste categorizations, even while they constantly shift, they've not been fixed over historical time, but they have facilitated and justified extreme forms of exploitation and have served to naturalize social and economic inequality. Now, this naturalization may involve elaborate ideological justifications, perhaps religious ones, textual or mythological, but it doesn't depend on any one particular religious or ideological system. What has often been involved historically are elaborate public rituals and performances of organized hierarchy that serve as reminders of the human categorizations and the ranking of prestige, that ascending scale of reverence and descending scale of contempt to which Ambedkar refers. These practices of public honor and its denial, public humiliations, have been documented in a multitude of practices around things like dress code or rules of access to public spaces or the exclusions from temples or tea shops and so on. My study of Indian Christianity showed in detail how caste in this form can perfectly easily take Christian shape, as church rituals exclude Dalits or are organized so as to dramatize the hierarchies of caste and caste inequality. Burial grounds, Christian burial grounds may be caste segregated, access to the priesthood may be restricted, and so on. Now, the next point is that despite the way that caste often takes the form of public rituals or performative expressions of hierarchies of honor, I'm among several researchers who have long-term experience of particular places who've noticed a significant change. Certainly over the 30 years that I've been visiting one particular caste-divided southern Tamil village, I've seen many of the performances of caste and caste honor and dishonor, or the public exclusions, disappear. Of course, some of them are rendered illegal by the Prevention of Atrocities Act. At the same time, of course, Dalit assertions of previously denied honor have provoked very public violent backlashes and reactions to that. Still, caste as rank, as public honor, is less commonly expressed. Although my Dalit friends from the village continue to perceive casteism as an inner state of mind, a mentality or a disposition, often expressed more subtly in a variety of new codes or technologies, or through technologies, through dress, through objects, through mobile phones, through gestures, sounds, and other behaviors, things that Murali Shanmugavelan, who spoke in the first session, along with Murali, has carefully documented. Paradoxically, in some of these villages that I'm familiar with, although caste in its public performance is less apparent than in the past, caste is more visible than ever in the form of associations, caste associations, fronts, NGOs, political parties. And this points to the next fundamental aspect of caste, and that is that caste belonging as a means of access to the things that matter is become, or rather to say that caste belonging has become critically about access to the things that matter. Belonging to a caste, belonging to a group, belonging to an association, providing access to economic resources, to jobs, to political influence, or maybe to justice or to protection. Today, the banners and posters and marriage halls, the scholarships and the prizes for topper students issued by regionally linked description collecting caste associations are not organized so much as they were for village level honor, as much as networking for access to the regional economy and the jobs and the benefits that that can provide. There's been a shift, if you like, from caste as the mediator of honor to caste as the mediator of opportunity, in particular economic opportunity. Caste is not, as many authors have suggested, eroded by social and economic change, even though its effects may be less visible. Now, once occupational diversification and education and urbanization and population mobility or migration begin to detach caste relations from the old agrarian forms of domination and servitude, this looser caste of belonging as a form of network becomes more important. Caste is now seen as a durable, wide-ranging set of networks of potential or actual kin, offering access to jobs, to business opportunities, or to protection in the form of social insurance in crisis. It's increasingly clear, I think, that caste identity in this way is a resource. The value of this resource and the necessity of caste membership is demonstrated by the low and stable rate of outmarriage at just 5% in rural India. And among educated middle-class Indians, 70% still marry within their caste. But the effects of caste in an intensely caste-networked society are radically different from those inheriting socially privileged identities and those inheriting inferiorized identities. All the opportunity hoarding advantages of caste networks that make caste, as Barbara Harris White puts it, a social structure of accumulation in the modern market economy, involve exclusions and restricted opportunity that makes caste at the same time a structure of discrimination affecting the opportunities of those with inferiorized identities. The effects of this structure, advantage and disadvantage, are made visible in aggregate in India by the recent work of economists such as Ashwini Deshpande. The data show, for example, a continued association of privileged castes with higher status professions and Dalits with manual and casual labor, despite rapid economic growth and poverty reduction. They show glass walls against Dalit occupational mobility out of caste-type roles and low-end service trades. They show widening disparities in earning at the top of the income distribution, that is glass ceilings, while the business economy is characterized by a so-called sticky floor that keeps Dalits at the bottom, running petty shops or being dealers and agents. There is a grammar of caste, as Ashwini Deshpande says. This could be the operating system we heard about earlier, and that is put to work in the modern economic system. But what are the mechanisms of this grammar? At root, they're those things that fundamentally characterize caste, the categorizations and differential valuation of people and of work, the gradients of respect and honor, the power inequalities that these instantiate. We can perhaps be a bit more specific about how the Indian economy, and by extension other caste-affected economies, are pre-structured for caste effects. First, there's a persisting occupational ranking. Again, that differential valuation of work and workers, businesses and markets. And this involves caste typing jobs, such as at the bottom, Dalit labor in sanitary work, and the placing of the social costs of the disposal of noxious waste onto undervalued humans, as Barbara Harris White found in her study of the informal waste economy in a Tamil town. Correspondingly, the valued sectors of food, health, education, hospitality, and services are relatively closed to Dalit workers and businesses. Second, systems of recruitment operate on social categories, independent of the individual attributes that people may have, restricting mobility to more skilled work and producing what sociologist Charles Tilly calls categorical exclusion. And the counterpart, opportunity hoarding, is found at the upper end of the employment, where, for example, studies show the IT industry consolidates occupational privilege by recruiting from middle class and upper caste sections. Third, opportunity hoarding and exclusion operate through the role of caste networks. Their role, for example, is in job recruitment, so as to segment the labor market, or in business by making caste connections the basis of trust or access to credit or markets. Discrimination in recruitment on the basis of caste is well documented. Both discrimination acting directly on caste identity, as revealed in studies using fake CVs showing would-be employers sorting equivalently qualified candidates by caste, or indirectly discrimination operating on the characteristics, the language, the confidence, the signs of caste cultural capital that might be present, always bundled up as individual merit so as to disguise the underlying caste capital involved. But modern caste has other more subtle mechanisms that work on individuals themselves. Discrimination produces differential expectations so that privileged caste or class graduates experience prejudicial norms and networks, not as caste privilege or benefits, but as their individual casteless merit. They feel rewarded by their individual characteristics, despite their opportunities arising out of the historical caste privileges they have. Whereas Dalits experience themselves as marked and categorized by their caste at every turn. Goel and Deshpande show the repeated effect of this on self-worth, or as an effect of depressed entitlement, in that in a national survey, Dalits were found to perceive lower levels of earnings as remunerative. But we've also learnt that caste identity is not a fixed attribute. What's important is the context that makes caste salient, that imposes caste or makes caste inescapable for some, but not for others. In a well-known study, Hoff and Pandey show that the performance of Dalit schoolboys, unknown to each other, in maze-solving tasks fell below boys of other castes by about 23%, but only when their caste was publicly announced. When caste identity was unknown and so not salient, not brought into the picture, they performed equally well as any of the other caste boys. The powerful effect of the suspected judgment of others on someone, the so-called stereotype threat effect, reminds us that caste is relational and always frame dependent. Casteism then takes the form of framing, of creating situations where caste becomes relevant. However subtly, through language, through gesture, through the kinds of questions that might be asked, invoking the identity and judgments of caste. Indeed, you could say that the modern power over Dalits is precisely the making salient of caste, as is very clear in the Cisco case, to those who seek to escape its social judgments. Invariably, the message behind making caste salient is one that questions whether a person belongs in a particular place or position or role, and invokes a preordained order in which that person might have a different, would be attributed a different position, and questions what they can and should aspire to. I don't need to tell you that, or anybody here, that when this happens, amidst the expectation of equal treatment, for example, in a college or a business or an IT company, it can be experienced as shocking, humiliating, even traumatic, signaling as it does the inescapability of caste. And we know from the tragic death of Rohit Vemula how this can play out. A final point here is that that I want to make here is about the privileged group denial and the delegitimation of objections to caste discrimination. And here is where I turn to the experience of the failed attempt to introduce protection against discrimination based on caste through amendment to the UK equality law. Meena Danda and Annapurna Wargre have talked at length about this experience and its relevance to the Cisco case in an earlier session. So I'm going to highlight just one aspect which concerns this delegitimizing of claims to legal protection by Dalit organizations and those advocating change in the law. And also the attempts for the preservation of caste privilege through the denial of casteism and indeed of caste entirely. Once the UK Parliament had voted to prohibit caste discrimination in equality law by making caste an aspect of the protected characteristic of race in the Equality Act of 2010, Meena led a team that included Annapurna and myself to consider the implications of legal change and to engage with various stakeholders involved to solicit their views. The formal consultation on implementation of the amended law that was to follow never actually took place, and the legislation remained unimplemented by the Conservative government. In fact, in June 2018, another consultation was held, not on how to implement the law, but whether legal change was needed at all, or whether reliance on case law would suffice. And this produced some 16,000 responses, indicating the issue of caste and the law was highly controversial and mobilized collectives for and against introducing caste into law. The only aspect of this hugely important process that I want to highlight here is the strong opposition to legal change that was mounted by a range of interlinked Hindu organizations. To put it at its simplest, the position of this lobby was A, that legislation is unnecessary because caste discrimination does not exist in the UK, but actually more generally, and B, that legislation and public debate on caste in any form is illegitimate since it produces prejudice against the Hindu religious minority. In a public campaign also targeting politicians during elections, there was an utter rejection by this Hindu lobby of caste itself, described as a negatively charged and inherently racist word, the use of which in British legislation is an act of anti-Hindu racial and religious violence and prejudice of the highest order, to quote a letter to an MP from the Alliance of Hindu Organizations. Now, I interpret the Hindu organization's response here as having two aspects. The first is what might be thought of as an externalization of caste. The idea of caste is rejected as a false and denigrating Orientalist theological form of knowledge about Indians and specifically Hindus. Caste and the category Dalit or untouchable are missionary inventions designed for the purpose of proselytism, and it's claimed that proselytism is the underlying rationale for the anti-discrimination legislation itself in a complicated and bizarre logic that we might come back to in discussion. Anti-discrimination protection is effectively transformed discursively into a matter of offended religious sentiment. And since caste is an internal Indian matter as well as a Hindu matter, the proposal to bring caste into UK law is rejected as, again to quote from a Hindu activist, as a continuing foreign interference in India's internal affairs. An ironic comment because of the manner in which the caste controversy in fact brought Indian Hindutva politics into British elections, particularly in 2015. In all of this, the attention has entirely shifted away from the Dalit experience of discrimination, which is marginalized and removed from any serious consideration. The second aspect of this, of the Hindu organization's response is what might be called internalization rather than externalization. And here the objection is that legislation against caste discrimination will cause, to quote from this point of view, untold harm to the associational and economic freedoms of South Asian communities. Caste legislation would interfere or ban aspects of social life that were internal to the Hindu community while unleashing, as was claimed, vexatious caste discrimination cases. So while the focus of the Dalit pro-legislation organizations was protection against caste discrimination, the Hindu organization focus was on protecting the space for a religious identity as British Hindus, or now redescribed as dharmic religionists, as a kind of, as often described, a model minority. Arguably, projections of a modern unified Hindu religious identity are important here precisely because of the continuing significance of differentiated caste or jati identities, as again was noted by one Hindu activist as an indispensable part of the associational life of Indians in the United Kingdom. Caste is vital to family status, to marriage, community leadership, temple organization, voluntary organizations and business and other networks, but it has to be protected as an inner domain. And this especially in order to prevent any form of outsider regulation, in particular through legislation. So we have in this instance, perhaps a contest between claims to freedom from caste discrimination on the one hand, and claims to the freedom of caste association in the name of religion on the other. And this, of course, echoes earlier historical contests of that kind that Ambedkar provoked earlier in the last century. I think I'll stop there So there's time for discussion and see what points people would like to pick up on.